It starts with a sound so deliberate, so unnervingly precise in its repetition, that for several long, suspended seconds I lie completely still beneath the weight of my blankets, my breath shallow and cautious, as though even the act of breathing too loudly might invite whatever made that noise to repeat it again, closer this time, inside the room rather than beyond the walls, because it isn't the careless knock of a late night visitor or the impatient pounding of someone who expects an answer. It is something else entirely, something measured and metallic, like knuckles replaced with cold steel, striking wood with a hollow, resonant clink that lingers in the silence long after the impact itself has faded. I check the time without moving my head, only shifting my eyes toward the faint blue glow of my phone resting face up on the bedside table. And when I see 3 a.m. staring back at me in silent confirmation, a thin, unpleasant tension coils itself tighter in my chest, because there is something about that hour that makes everything feel staged, as though the world has momentarily paused to observe itself, waiting for something to happen that should not. The knock comes again, not louder, not softer, exactly the same. A perfect repetition. My body reacts before my thoughts can catch up, my hands sliding slowly out from under the blanket as I sit up, the mattress shifting beneath me with a quiet creak that seems, in the thick stillness of the house, almost intrusive. And I find myself listening not just for another knock, but for anything else. Footsteps retreating, the whisper of fabric, the subtle confirmation of a presence that would make this feel grounded, explainable. But there is nothing, only the distant hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the faint ticking of something expanding and contracting in the walls as the night air presses in from outside. I swing my legs over the edge of the bed, my bare feet meeting the cold floor in a way that sends a small, involuntary shiver up through my spine. And I stand there for a moment, adjusting to the darkness, letting my eyes stretch themselves into something more useful, before I begin moving toward the door with slow, deliberate steps, each one placed carefully, as though the floor itself might betray me if I move too quickly. The hallway beyond my bedroom is darker than it should be. I know this space. I've walked it countless times, half asleep without needing to think, but now it feels longer, the shadows thicker, pooling in the corners like something tangible. And as I step out into it, I instinctively reach for the wall, my fingers brushing along the cool paint until they find the light switch, hesitating there for a fraction of a second before I flip it. Nothing happens. The bulb doesn't flicker, doesn't struggle, it simply doesn't respond at all, and I'm left standing there in the same dense, swallowing darkness, my hand still resting against the switch as if pressing it again might somehow change the outcome. Another knock, closer now. Or maybe that's just how it feels. I move, faster this time, down the hallway, past the silent door frames, past the living room where the shapes of furniture sit like hunched figures in the dark, until I reach the front door, my hand hovering just inches from the handle as I pause, listening again, my entire body tuned to the smallest shift in sound, the faintest indication that I am not alone on the other side of this barrier. There is nothing, no breathing, no footsteps, just that oppressive, waiting silence. I lean forward, pressing my eye to the peephole, the cold metal rim biting lightly into the skin around it as I squint through the warped lens, needing to see something that makes sense, a person, a shape, anything that can justify the sound that pulled me from sleep. But the doorstep is empty, completely empty. The porch light casts a pale, steady glow over the concrete, illuminating nothing but the faint texture of its surface and the edge of the welcome mat, slightly curled at one corner as it always is, undisturbed, untouched, as though no one has stood there at all. And yet, the knock came from here. I know it did. My hand tightens around the handle before I realize I've even touched it, and for a brief, irrational moment, I consider opening the door, stepping out into that empty space just to prove to myself that there is nothing there, that this is all some misfiring of a tired mind. But something stops me, not fear exactly, but a quieter, more insistent instinct that suggests opening that door would be a mistake I cannot undo. Instead, I slide the deadbolt into place, the heavy metal thunk echoing softly in the stillness, and I crouch down slightly, my gaze drifting toward the base of the door where the narrow gap between wood and floor allows a thin strip of the outside light to cut across the darkness inside. That's when I see it. Something small, rectangular, resting just inches from the threshold, positioned so neatly that it almost looks placed rather than dropped, its edges catching the light just enough to reveal a dull, metallic sheen. For a moment, I don't move. I just stare at it, my mind struggling to reconcile the emptiness I saw through the peephole with the undeniable presence of this object now sitting on my floor. Inside my house. Slowly, carefully, I reach out and pick it up. It's colder than I expect. Not just cool from the night air, but cold in a way that feels unnatural, as though it has been kept somewhere devoid of warmth for far too long. And I turn it over in my fingers, bringing it closer to the faint light spilling in from the living room windows. A USB drive. Plain. Unmarked. Except for one thing. A strip of black tape wrapped around its center. And on that tape, written in uneven, hurried strokes, are two words that immediately settle into my chest like a weight. Don't watch. I stare at it longer than I should, my thumb brushing lightly over the rough surface of the tape, tracing the indented grooves of the letters as if they might reveal something more under pressure, some hidden intention behind the warning. But the longer I hold it, the more aware I become of the silence pressing in around me again. The house seeming to listen, to wait. Without fully deciding to, I stand. I lock the door again, checking it twice this time, and I turn away from the hallway, moving back toward my room with the drive still clutched in my hand, my grip tightening slightly with each step, as though letting go of it now would somehow be worse than holding on. By the time I sit down at my desk, the faint glow of my laptop screen reflecting dimly in the dark window beside it, I realize I've already made the decision. The USB rests between my fingers, hovering just inches from the port, and yet I hesitate. Because the house is still too quiet. Because the knock hasn't come again. Because somewhere deep beneath the surface of my thoughts, there is a growing certainty that whatever waits on this drive has been waiting for me specifically. And it knows I'm here. The hesitation stretches, thick and suffocating, as though time itself has slowed to accommodate the weight of the decision pressing down on me, and I find my eyes drifting repeatedly between the dark, reflective surface of the laptop screen and the small, inert object in my hand, its metallic edges catching what little ambient light bleeds into the room. The crude message on the tape seeming to pulse with a quiet insistence that I cannot quite ignore, even as my fingers tighten around it, my thumb pressing unconsciously into the word "don't," as though I might physically erase the warning through pressure alone. I tell myself it's nothing. A prank. Something left by a neighbor or a mistake, or a coincidence that only feels significant because of the hour, because of the silence, because of the way my mind insists on filling in the gaps with things that are not there. And yet, even as I construct these explanations, layering them carefully over the unease creeping through me, there is a part of me that does not believe any of it. A quieter voice that lingers beneath the rationalizations, reminding me of the empty doorstep, of the impossibility of that object appearing where no one stood. My laptop hums softly as I lift the lid, the screen flickering to life in a muted wash of pale light that pushes back just enough of the darkness to reveal the edges of the room. The desk, cluttered with scattered papers, the chair slightly angled as though someone else might have just stood from it, the open doorway behind me leading back into the unlit hallway, and I feel an inexplicable reluctance to turn my back fully to that doorway, to expose myself to whatever might be waiting beyond it, even though I know, logically, that there is nothing there. I sit anyway, slowly, carefully. The chair creaks under my weight, the sound sharper than it should be, and I place the USB drive down on the desk for a moment, watching it as though it might move on its own if I look away, my fingers hovering just above it before finally, deliberately, I pick it up again and guide it toward the port. The moment it connects, there is a faint, almost inaudible click, followed by the soft chime of recognition from the laptop, a sound I have heard 1,000 times before, yet now it feels different, hollow, distant, as though it is echoing from somewhere deeper than the device itself. The screen responds almost immediately, too quickly. A new window opens without prompt, without delay, bypassing the usual lag, the slight hesitation that accompanies most external drives, and I feel a subtle tightening in my chest as I lean closer, my eyes scanning the contents before I have time to question whether I should. There is only one file, no folders, no additional data. Just a single video file sitting in the center of the screen, its name rendered in stark, unformatted text, playame.mp4. For a long moment, I don't move. I simply stare at it, my mind tracing the edges of the situation, searching for something familiar, something that aligns with the normal patterns of the world I understand, but nothing about this feels normal. Not the timing, not the delivery, not the absence of anything else on the drive. And yet, despite all of that, I feel an undeniable pull toward it, a quiet, insistent curiosity that overrides the warning I read only moments ago. My hand moves before I consciously decide. The cursor drifts across the screen, hovers, and then clicks. The video opens in a basic media player, the interface bare and unremarkable, a thin progress bar stretching across the bottom, the timestamp reading 00/217, and for a brief second the screen remains black, reflecting my own faint outline back at me, distorted slightly by the angle of the display. Then it begins. The image that fades in is grainy, washed in a dull, desaturated tone that suggests age or poor quality, the kind of visual noise that comes from older cameras or corrupted files, and it takes me a moment to process what I'm looking at, my brain struggling to organize the shapes and shadows into something coherent. It's a room, a familiar one, my living room. I lean forward, my breath catching slightly as recognition settles in, my eyes moving quickly across the details. The placement of the couch, the small table near the window, the uneven alignment of the picture frames on the wall, and there is no doubt, no room for misinterpretation. This is my house, exactly as it was, but something about it feels off, not just because of the quality of the footage, but because of the perspective. The camera is positioned in the corner, high, angled downward, a vantage point I do not have never had, and yet here it is, capturing the entire space in a wide, unblinking frame. The room is empty, at first, completely still, and then movement. Subtle, at the edge of the frame, a figure steps into view from the hallway, its form partially obscured by the grain and distortion, but human enough in shape to register immediately. Tall, thin, its posture slightly hunched as it moves with a slow, deliberate pace across the room, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as though listening to something I cannot hear. I feel my throat tighten, because I know this moment. Not from memory, exactly, but from something deeper. A vague, unformed recognition that settles into my bones as I watch the figure move through a space that should have been empty, that should have been safe. The timestamp in the corner of the video flickers faintly. A date. Years ago. A time when I was living here, alone. The figure stops in the center of the room. It doesn't look at the camera. It doesn't acknowledge it at all. Instead, it turns slowly, its attention shifting toward something off-screen, toward the hallway that leads impossibly to where I am now, sitting at my desk, watching this unfold in real time. And then, with a sudden, jarring clarity, the video glitches. The image distorts, the figure disappears, the screen cuts to black. For a fraction of a second, there is nothing. Then text appears, white, centered, unmistakable. You're next. The video ends, the player closes on its own, and in the silence that follows, thick and absolute, I become acutely aware of something that wasn't there before. A sound, faint, distant, but unmistakably familiar, coming from somewhere deep within the house. The exact same slow, metallic rhythm I heard at the door. Now, from inside. For several long, suspended seconds after the screen goes dark, I remain exactly where I am, hunched slightly toward the laptop as though the absence of the image might somehow reverse itself if I refuse to move. My fingers still hovering near the keyboard, my eyes fixed on the place where the words had just been. You're next. Lingering, not just in memory, but in a way that feels almost physical, as though the letters have imprinted themselves somewhere behind my vision, flickering faintly whenever I blink. The house does not feel the same anymore. It is not a sudden shift, not an obvious transformation that I can point to and explain, but something subtler, more insidious, like a pressure change that I can feel in my ears, in my chest, in the way the air itself seems heavier, thicker, as though it has been disturbed by something that should not be here, something that has moved through it and left it altered in ways I cannot fully perceive. And then I hear it again. That same sound, that same precise metallic knock, but it is not at the door anymore. It comes from somewhere deeper inside the house. I straighten slowly, my chair letting out a soft, reluctant creak beneath me, and I turn my head toward the open doorway of my room, my eyes straining against the darkness beyond it, searching for movement, for shape, for anything that might anchor the sound to something real, something understandable. But the hallway remains empty, the shadows undisturbed, stretching long and thin along the walls like stains that have settled too deeply to be removed. The knock comes again, closer this time, not louder, never louder, but nearer, as though whatever is making it has taken a step forward, closing a distance I cannot see. My throat feels dry. I swallow, the motion loud in my own ears, and I push myself up from the chair, my hand instinctively brushing against the edge of the desk, as though I needed to confirm its solidity, to remind myself that the physical world still behaves as it should, even as everything else begins to feel uncertain. I move toward the doorway, slowly. Each step deliberate, my weight shifting carefully as though the floor might betray me if I move too quickly. And as I reach the threshold, I pause, my fingers curling slightly against the frame, grounding myself in the rough texture of the wood as I lean forward just enough to peer into the hallway. It looks the same, and yet it doesn't. The proportions feel wrong, subtly stretched, as though the distance between the walls has increased by just enough to unsettle me without providing anything concrete to focus on, and the darkness itself seems deeper, more complete, swallowing the faint ambient light that should be reaching it from the windows in the living room. Another knock from the kitchen. I know that without thinking. The realization settles into me with a quiet certainty, the layout of the house mapping itself instinctively in my mind, and I find myself moving again before I can fully process the decision, stepping out into the hallway, my bare feet brushing softly against the floor as I follow the sound. With each step, something else begins to emerge, not just the knock, other sounds, faint at first, subtle but unmistakable. The low hum of the refrigerator, the soft, intermittent creak of the living room floorboards, the distant, almost imperceptible rattle of something loose near the window. Sounds that are normal, familiar, except they are happening in the exact same sequence, the exact same rhythm as they did in the video. I stop, mid-step, my breath catching as the realization locks into place, my mind racing backward through what I just watched, replaying the grainy footage, the empty room, the subtle ambient noises that filled the silence before the figure appeared. And now those same sounds are unfolding around me, not randomly, not naturally, but with a precision that feels orchestrated, deliberate, as though something is following a script that has already been written. No, I whisper, though the word feels fragile, insubstantial, barely audible even to myself. The knock comes again, from the kitchen. I move faster now. Not running, not quite, but no longer careful, my steps quicker, more urgent as I push down the hallway, past the living room where the shadows seem to shift at the edges of my vision, stretching unnaturally along the walls, elongating in ways that do not match the angle of any light source I can identify. I reach the kitchen entrance and stop abruptly, my body tensing as I take in the scene before me. The room is dim, lit only by the faint spill of light from the living room windows, and everything appears exactly as it should. The counters, the sink, the refrigerator humming softly in the corner, and yet there is something deeply wrong in the stillness, something that prickles at the back of my mind, refusing to resolve into something I can name. The sound comes again. Not from the door, not from the walls, but from inside the room. A metallic knock, sharp, precise, directly in front of me. My eyes lower slowly to the countertop where a single object rests. Small, rectangular, familiar. The USB drive. I freeze because I know, with absolute certainty, that I did not bring it with me, that I left it on the desk, that I watched the video, saw the message, heard the sound, and yet, here it is, waiting, positioned neatly near the edge of the counter, as though placed there with care, its metallic surface catching the faint light, the strip of black tape still wrapped around its center, the words "Don't watch" facing upward, perfectly aligned so that I cannot avoid reading them again. The knock comes one more time, but this time, it doesn't echo through the house. It comes from the drive itself. A hollow, impossible sound vibrating faintly through the metal, traveling up through the countertop and into my fingertips as I reach out without thinking, my hand trembling slightly as I move closer, drawn by something I do not understand, something that feels less like curiosity now and more like inevitability. The moment my fingers make contact, the surface of the drive is no longer cold. It is warm, as though it has been held, as though something else was just touching it. Behind me, from the hallway, I hear a soft, deliberate shift, not a knock, not a creak, but the unmistakable sound of something taking a step inside my house. And without turning, without allowing myself to confirm what I already feel pressing against the edges of my awareness, I know the sequence isn't just repeating, it's continuing. And this time, I am part of it. The realization does not arrive all at once, but instead seeps slowly into me, threading itself through every nerve, every thought, until it becomes impossible to separate what I know from what I fear. And I remain there in the dim half-light of the kitchen, my fingers still resting against the surface of the USB drive, its unnatural warmth pressing faintly into my skin as though it possesses a pulse of its own, something subtle and rhythmic that echoes just beneath the threshold of perception. And behind me, in the suffocating quiet of the hallway, I can still feel it, that presence, unmoving yet undeniably closer now, occupying space in a way that distorts the air itself. I should turn around. Every instinct demands it, urges me to face whatever has entered my home, to confirm its shape, its distance, its intention. But something deeper, more primal, roots me in place, a quiet, paralyzing certainty that the moment I look, something irreversible will occur. Something that will collapse the fragile barrier between observation and participation that I have somehow managed to maintain up until now. Instead, my gaze drifts forward, back toward the kitchen, back toward the counter, back toward the laptop, because it is on. I don't remember bringing it here. I don't remember opening it. And yet it sits there, angled slightly toward me as though positioned with intention, its screen glowing with that same pale, lifeless light, casting long, thin shadows across the countertop that stretch unnaturally toward the floor, bending at angles that do not align with any source I can identify. The screen flickers once. Twice. then stabilizes, a video feed, grainy, desaturated, familiar. For a moment, my mind refuses to process what I'm seeing, clinging instead to the surface details, the static crawling faintly across the image, the slight delay in motion, the warped perspective of a camera placed too high, too far back. But then the shapes resolve, the patterns align, and recognition settles in with a cold, suffocating clarity. It's my kitchen. This kitchen. The same counters, the same refrigerator, the same faint spill of light from the living room, captured from an angle that does not exist. And there, in the frame, is me, standing exactly where I am now, one hand resting on the counter, the other hanging uselessly at my side, my posture rigid, my head slightly bowed as though listening for something I cannot yet hear. And the delay between my movement and the movement on the screen is just enough to register, just enough to confirm that this is not a reflection, not a mirror, but a live feed with a fraction of time stretched thin between us. My breath falters, because I am not alone in the frame. At first, I don't see it. My eyes lock onto my own image, tracking the subtle shifts in posture, the minute tremors in my hand, but then, slowly, almost reluctantly, they begin to drift past myself, toward the darker portion of the image, toward the hallway behind me. And that's when it emerges. Not all at once, not with sudden motion or dramatic reveal, but gradually, as though it has always been there, hidden in the grain and distortion, waiting for the exact moment my mind is ready to perceive it. A shape, pale, elongated, its form indistinct, its edges blurred by the low quality of the feed, but unmistakably humanoid in its outline, standing just beyond the threshold of the kitchen, its posture mirroring something deeply wrong, its head tilted at that same unnatural angle I saw in the video, as though it is listening not to the environment, but to me. I feel it then. Not through sight, not yet, but through something else. A shift in the air behind me. A faint displacement, subtle but undeniable, like the moment before someone steps too close, when your body registers their presence before your eyes confirm it. The figure on the screen moves, slowly, deliberately. It takes a step forward, and a fraction of a second later, I hear it, behind me, the same step, perfectly synchronized. My body locks, every muscle tightening at once, my breath caught somewhere between inhale and exhale, my chest burning with the effort of holding still, because now there is no doubt, no ambiguity left to cling to. The sequence is complete, the pattern fulfilled, and whatever I watched, whatever I allowed into my home through that small innocuous device is no longer confined to a recording. It is here. The screen flickers again, the image distorts, and then text, white, centered, over the live feed. Don't turn around. The words feel heavier than before, more urgent, more immediate, not a warning left behind, but a command being issued in real time. And for a brief, impossible moment, I consider obeying it, freezing completely, refusing to move, refusing to acknowledge the presence that now stands just behind me, close enough that I can almost feel the absence of warmth where it occupies space. But something inside me resists. A stubborn, desperate need to know, to see, to confirm. And slowly, against every instinct screaming at me to remain still, I begin to turn my head. The movement is slight, barely perceptible, but the effect is immediate. On the screen, I watch myself begin to rotate, the delayed motion unfolding with agonizing slowness, and behind that version of me, the figure reacts. Not with surprise, not with aggression, but with a subtle shift, its head tilting further, its posture straightening just enough to suggest awareness. Anticipation. My vision blurs at the edges. The room feels thinner, the distance between myself and the screen stretching, warping as though the space itself is being pulled taut. I turn further, just enough to see nothing. The hallway is empty, completely, utterly. And yet, on the screen, it is still there, standing directly behind me, closer now. So close that its form begins to resolve, its pale surface gaining detail, texture, something almost like skin stretched too tightly over something that does not conform to human structure. Its face, if it can be called that. Featureless, except for the suggestion of depth where eyes should be. Hollow spaces that seem to absorb the light around them. My heart slams violently against my ribs, because the delay is shortening. The gap between what I do and what appears on the screen is collapsing, shrinking with each passing second, the two timelines converging into one. And as I stare at the image, unable to look away, I see my on-screen self complete the turn fully, and the figure moves. Not slowly this time, not deliberately, but suddenly, violently. It leans forward, its form distorting as it closes the final distance, its pale shape engulfing the frame, consuming the space where I stand. The screen cuts to black. The laptop snaps shut on its own with a sharp final crack that echoes through the kitchen. Silence. Total. Absolute. I stand there, frozen, my body locked in place, my head still partially turned, my breath shallow and uneven, and for a long, immeasurable stretch of time, nothing happens. No movement, no sound, no presence, just the quiet. And then, from somewhere very close behind me, a slow metallic knock.